Amy Horowitz is a freelance photographer based in New York City who takes portraits of young adults in and around Washington Square Park, looking for the softness under the shell and documenting today's generation in tumultuous times, in moments of connection. Here's the core message of her work, and I really like how she says it. I was brought up in a different way, but people are how they are. We're all the same. The message is deceptively simple, of course. Her photographs, on the other hand, tell deep stories about people, identities, self-expression, and navigating turbulent times. Because life is messy sometimes. Here's my conversation with Amy. And I will thank you, Amy, so much for making time to speak with me today because I'm looking forward to learning more about you and your work.
Well, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. And so I'll start just by asking you how you became a photographer.
I've always enjoyed photography. I have three children who are now adults, and I used to, of course, photograph my children. And I really got into it. We had a lake house, and they were young, and I have a little bit of anxiety, and you can't see under the dark water of a lake, so I would be kind of anxious, and my husband would have them jumping off cliffs and on rafts in the back of the boat and things. So. I would just have my camera in my hand, and that kept me focused on something else. Even though I was photographing them, I just felt it was different. I had something else going on in my mind, so I was less anxious. So, we'd have people come visit, and I'd always send them pictures. This was back in the day of film only, and I'd run to the drugstore and get two copies of every picture made, keep one, give one away. And then my kids hit puberty and didn't want their picture taken anymore. That was the end of that. And I'm an empty nester now. We moved to the city from the suburbs, and I just immediately started taking classes, photography classes. And I've been doing it ever since.
And so what shifted in terms of what drew your attention as a photographer, moving on from your children to other themes?
Well, I had been taking classes, and then in the classes, you always have to identify a project or something specific you're working towards. And in the beginning, I started taking classes, then COVID hit. And I was one of the few people who still went outside. I'd walk my 5 miles, take my camera, and whatever I could shoot, I could shoot. But my project at the time was architecture, and I found it a little bit boring after a while. It was great during COVID. There were no cars or people blocking the buildings. It was perfect, but it just didn't have the same interaction. And then one day I came upon a drag queen, and they were changing from their heels into Birkenstocks, and I just saw them, big red hair, green like sequin outfit, and I'm like, could I take your portrait? I don't know what came over me. I just asked. And they said, yes, but you cannot photograph my feet because I don't want to be seen in these Birkenstocks because they were ugly shoes. So I took their picture. It was great. Went back to class. And then, just in speaking with my professor, talking about how not everybody can take portraits. It's not that easy. You have to approach people, communicate. But I liked it. And then I switched my focus. We busted out of COVID. More people were around. And that's when I started shooting young adults in my neighborhood and in Washington Square Park,
In New
which is
York City.
nearby in New York City. Yes.
So just because I'm curious, when you say I'm not sure what came over me, but I just approached that person and asked if I could take their portrait, what do you think was in you to just say, I'm just going to take a chance and maybe they're going to say no, but I'm going to do it anyway?
That's exactly what I thought. But you know how there's two sides to everybody? Part of you can be like a little shy and hesitant, and part of you can be just pushy and out there. I'm kind of both. and the the out there took over that day. Maybe it was from being locked in with COVID and not communicating with a lot of people, and then there, oh yeah, there's a person, an interesting person. So maybe that was it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And so then you continued taking portraits of people in the streets. And did you interact with them often? Like, would you speak with them or?
Well, when I first started, I was incredibly nervous. So when I would approach and ask for a portrait, I took that portrait and I left. I didn't ask their name. There was no chit chat. I just got what I needed and left. And so a lot of my early work, I don't have people's names and I wasn't connected to them. But I try to go out every day and shoot. This is like 5 years now. And it's gotten so much easier. And now I get everybody's name and I keep in touch on Instagram and I'm a little bit more chatty if time allows for them and me. So yeah,
How do you find that? And it might not, but how does it change the photographs you're taking when you do interact with the person?
it's much better. So I had started out, my Instagram is it's at Don't Smile NYC. So I would start off because when I studied portraits, a lot of them, I thought the better ones were when people weren't smiling originally. Yes, artists can evolve. So, now there are some smiles in my portfolio, but I started with just be yourself. Just be you because when people see a picture with a smile, they all of a sudden think, "Oh, that's a happy person." And they don't spend a lot of time with the picture trying to figure out the person from clues like, their clothes or other details. So when you start interacting, they just get more relaxed. So when I say don't smile, what happens is they either say, "Oh, that's okay, I never smile," or "Oh my God, how am I going to do this? I'm going to keep smiling." And then they giggle and they laugh and then they relax. So that helps. They get relaxed. And I'm not very threatening, and we do chit chat, and I find it does make it better. The pictures do get better, and in fact, I've photographed some of these young adults repeatedly. Like I've run into them again. So if I run into them 6 months later, I'll ask to take their portrait again. And it's visually so interesting because here, where I live in New York, they'll change their hair color. Some I don't even recognize the second time. So it's very fun to see them evolve and kind of grow up in front of me, you know? So it gets better. The pictures get better, to your point, when you communicate, when you have conversation.
And so when you're in Washington Square Park, for example, and you're walking with with a camera, with a
Yes,
digital camera,
yes, yeah.
who captures your attention in terms of, I think I'd like to go ask that person.
Well, what I look for is definitely something visually interesting. So they have to have that. And then like I look for an inner quality that I refer to as the softness under the shell. So, they could have tattoos and piercings and purple hair, but I could see, like I look at them and I could see, I was a young adult. I raised my own children, and I could see there's something in there that's just more vulnerable, more innocent than the outer shell shows. And then I look for that, the combination, because I find that the most interesting.
Do, do you think there's something about you then that creates that space for people to have some trust to say, I'm going to allow myself to be a bit more seen maybe by her than by any other passerby?
Maybe maybe they think I'm motherly or nurturing. I mean, I don't know. Some girl looked me up and down once, and she's like, "Do you have a Band-Aid?" I mean, who would have a Band-Aid but a mother, like walking around? And of course, I did. And maybe that's it. I'm not sure. And also, I don't think I come across as threatening. I'll be like, "Oh, wait a second. Oh, my exposure's off. Give me a minute." I talk to myself as I take photos. So I'm just like a real human being. So they see that in me. I don't think they're afraid or threatened in any way.
Do they ever ask you how you're going to use the photos or what they're for?
I tell them, I show them my Instagram page. I tell them that I just published a book. Most don't even care. They never even asked, "What are you using it for?" I said it's my project, which it was, because when I started, I didn't know I'd be doing a book. I'd always wished I could, but I didn't know that that would happen. And so it was really like for my own project and my own art.
So now that you've brought up your book, can we talk about what led you to create that book?
Well, I've always wanted to publish a book. Years ago, I thought it would be from writing, but then I just, dove into photography and love it. I don't know. I think aside from all the other reasons that I made the book, it's a document of like this time and what this generation is like, if nothing else. And here in New York, in this area, the diversity of the kids, their self-expression. I mean, I just find I applaud them. I grew up in the suburbs. Everything was just more homogenous there. Everybody kind of looked the same, and I was much more reserved at their age and more careful and did the right thing. So it's almost like living vicariously through them and their self-expression, and it's great, especially in these troubling times, and not troubling, well, tumultuous times politically, and they're growing up in a different, way different environment than I did, you know. Freedom's being rolled back, democracy, not recognizing global warming. I mean, it's hard enough being a kid and transitioning to adulthood. That's its own thing, with a lot of insecurities and uncertainties. And then you add all these world problems in, that it must be so heavy for them to carry. It's nice that it's important that all this goes on. They have control to express themselves, and to speak out and to try and fight for their rights and their freedoms and all of that. The book is a celebration of all of that.
I love that. I love that. So the title, A Walk in the Park, how did you
Well,
choose that?
I don't live too far from the park, so I'm shooting mostly in the park and in my travels back and forth. But the title really speaks to literally it's in the park that I'm shooting, but beyond that, the phrase a walk in the park is really something is easy. And the book has a question mark. It says a walk in the park with a question mark because it's not always so easy. And there is so much ambiguity and uncertainty for them. So that's why.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the photo that you chose for the cover of the young woman on the book?
Well, when I was with the publisher and creative director, we were going through all my images trying to find a cover. And there were three in contention. It was based just, on the impact, the color, everything, the expression. And I had thrown it out, I think, to all three of them. And this one got back to me right away. And we agreed it would work. And even prior to, there are some pages in the book where there's text, where the pages happen to be pink. We had made that decision prior to the cover, to knowing what the cover was. So then it just all fell into place.
What do you like best about the photo? If you just describe it for me, if you like your memory of taking that photo and what you like about that photo.
I like the look the look they're giving me. I can't say she, I don't know the pronoun, but I like the look they're giving me and the colors. I like that there's a stain on their shirt. They had commented, "Oh my God, yeah, I even have the stain." I could have gotten rid of the stain, but I like it there because it just shows, life isn't perfect and there's things going on, and so I kind of like the stain on the shirt too.
They said that. The subject of the photo said
I said
that.
that.
Oh, you said that. Okay,
I said
okay. Oh,
I
okay, okay,
wanted to
okay.
keep the stain in. They were like, "Oh my God, there's a stain on my shirt." Like how can you use this picture? But to me, it worked. It worked into the whole thing because life isn't easy. It's messy sometimes.
How did you feel writing the text in the book? Because you mentioned that earlier you might have seen
Oh
yourself
yeah,
publishing a written book.
well, what happened was I wrote so much, and then I had somebody help me edit. And, they cut it down somewhat, but it was still long. Then the publisher thought it was way too long. Then it got edited down again. So, and now if I could do it all over, I would write it, it's hard to say. I like writing. I like writing, but I think with a lot of the, having people weigh in was a little tricky. I wish I could have just like, but when you're working with a publisher, there's compromises that need to be made. So I wish I could have just let it go, like, just right from everything. But it got pared down, and it's what I want to say for the most part.
So I'm interested in like the kinds of things that I'm interested in the sorts of things we can express maybe easier or more clearly through words, and then maybe the things through images. So there'll be things in your book, there'll be photos that speak and say certain things to us, and then there's the text that goes accompanies or not necessarily accompanies every image, but it's a different form of.
I think the text kind of just explains like the broader framework of why I did this project. I also included in the book in the inside flaps of the jacket. So for a while when I went photographing, I would take these index cards with me just for a short period of time. And I would ask them after I photographed them, can you write down something about yourself that somebody looking at you wouldn't know, or they'd be surprised to learn? And then I had a whole stack of cards with all these interesting things. So I put them in the inside jacket because I wanted their voices too, to be in the book as well, which I think is interesting. Somebody had commented, they looked at the words and they looked at the pictures and they were trying to figure out who said what. Nobody will know. But, I think that their words are important too, almost more important.
Oh, I like that you did that, and I like that you didn't match them up, that people
Yeah, I
had
think
their
it was better.
voices.
They were free to say what they wanted to say, and they didn't have to worry about somebody knowing they said that, whatever, because some of them were pretty personal, somebody said they hate themselves, or so, they're all different kinds of personal things.
What does vulnerability mean to you in your work?
In this work, I think it's the age. They're just vulnerable because lack of experience. And, I'm older, so like, and believe me, I'm still learning and don't know everything for sure. But I think there's some things I know more just because of how life has had twists and turns that you never saw coming. And at their age, maybe some have experienced a lot, maybe not. And I think it's uncertain for them, for some of them. Some of them are very, they know what they want to do, they're going after it. There's certainly plenty of those in the portraits, but some of them just are really like a little bit lost, unsure, and I think that creates a vulnerability because everybody wants a purpose, and they're not always sure what their purpose is, and so it makes them, I guess, uneasy, unsettled. All those words I think add up to vulnerability.
Absolutely. I mean, I do think I sort of, we sort of talked about it a little bit before, but I do think there is something about you that would make those young people open up to you, because it's not just anyone who would walk in the park who would approach them to speak with them that they'll necessarily have a conversation or share certain of the things. And people say, I hate myself. That's at a level of trust, I think, to share
Yeah,
that with another
that particular
person.
conversation, I'd photographed them a couple times, and we were sitting on a bench having a talk, and I'm trying to give them wisdom and to forgive themselves, and it's okay, and all that. It ended with a hug. I mean, it was that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know what it is. Like, there was another person I photographed. I was shooting them, and I'm a little klutzy to begin with, but I backed up and I tripped over, like on the sidewalk, if there's a tree, there's like a little fence around it. Well, I tripped over that, ripped my pants. I was bleeding, cursing. My camera hit the ground. They helped me up. They were very nice and took care of me. And then I posted their picture online, and then they posted something that said, little did Amy know that right before she took my picture, I was crying. I just lost my job. So here we had like that moment of human connection. Like, maybe I made them feel good choosing them to take their picture, and here they helped me. Like, it was just nice, and we're strangers. So, it's a nice thing, these little moments of connection. It's what keeps me coming back to doing it. Everybody's like, wow, you've been doing this 5 years? You have thousands of portraits. Why do you keep, they're like, I've had 6 projects in that time. I just like it. I mean, I try and play around with shooting other things, but I just like it.
What was the process of, so you had thousands of images. How did you decide what was going to go in the book?
Yeah, that was tricky. I narrowed it down. I have my mentor, my professor, and we went through which were the best. I think the best ones had the most mix of vulnerability and interest, and I wanted it to show the diversity of the whole spectrum of all different kinds of people too.
Yeah, no, I like that, and you corrected me earlier, and it's so important. But I gendered the person on the cover of your book, and you in a gentle way just sort of said they, and I'm like, right, like that's a
Well,
certain
it
awareness you
happened to
have.
me early on when I started shooting. I learned a lot from these kids, I have to say. They're not only learning from me or from adults, I learn from them. Any interaction you have, you learn. But I went to take somebody's picture and I couldn't get their attention. I said, "Excuse me, could you get his attention?" Because there was a crowd of people. And they're like, I got schooled. They're like, they. Well, I haven't made that mistake again. So, you have to speak their language and you know, I was brought up a different way, but I'm fully accepting. People are how they are. We're all the same. Is kind of the point of the book. Is we're all human. It doesn't matter if you have piercings and tattoos from head to toe or whatever. We all want the same things, you know.
I think I think that says a lot. I think there is like I guess I just keep going after the same thing, which is there's something about the way you engage with the young people in the park that makes them feel like this is an open, accepting space for them to be themselves. Something about what you, the way you speak, the way you approach, which I think is it's a wonderful. We all need to remember. It doesn't matter where we came from or what preconceptions we may have. We need to question those and push ourselves to be open and accepting of everyone in the moment as we pass through the world and we encounter all of these people. It's so special.
Exactly.
Okay, so that was vulnerability of the project from the perspective of the project. How about if I asked you, what does vulnerability mean to you as an artist?
Oh, as an artist, that would be like I had taken, a lot of portraits, hundreds, couple hundred, and my husband kept saying, "Well, why don't you post them somewhere? Why don't you put your work out there?" And I was nervous too. I didn't know, A, what that would be like. I was unsure. Would people like them? How would they be received? But then I did it and I jumped in, and then you get the feedback, and it's great. It's just making the leap, to just try and have people see your work. I mean, now I'm entering open calls and contests. I'm on a podcast. I mean, who knew? It was like way back, there was somebody I was nervous to take a portrait of, and I walked by twice and I said to myself, you have to go ask. If this is something you want to do, you can't be afraid. So, there's a vulnerability as an artist with, will my work be accepted? Doesn't matter, that was like another thought. Doesn't matter if people like it, but if you put it out there, why, I don't know. But
That is a tricky one because you got great reception and I understand why, absolutely, having looked at some of your photos, but that willingness to jump in has to also kind of include a willingness to get the not so good reception and then do question yourself and say, does it matter? Does it
right.
matter?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm happy and I'm doing it, I mean, I remember a friend of mine saying, "Have you made any money? How much money have you made?" And I'm like, well, that's not really at the moment, that's not really the point, And I think some people who don't have that artistic mind don't understand that. It's a different headspace.
Oh, just give me a sec because I had a question that flew in and then it flew out. Okay, thousands of images, and you've created the book, and you mentioned earlier that people would say, "Oh, I've done 6 projects," and you're still continuing on the same project because there's obviously something that still calls to you in that project. What are your next steps from here as you continue photographing?
I'm still doing what I'm doing. I'm taking workshops to get better at the candid street photography, when you see the street scenes, or I can do it. I just don't know if it's me. I don't have a ton of patience. Some people could stand near a sunny spot or a great background and wait all day for the perfect whatever to go by and get the photo. I don't have that much patience. So I don't know if that's for me, every now and then, but I don't know if every day I could do that. Walk the streets, let's say for 4 hours and come home with maybe no great pictures. I know if I go out to take portraits, chances are I could come home with a couple good ones.
Just to make the distinction then, there's the portraits when you go and you approach the person, you ask permission and you take photographs versus maybe the other form of, I don't, because I'm not that familiar, but the other form of street photography, which is you're just capturing
Yes, I
random
can't.
moments.
Right,
Like you're
right.
just,
Yes,
okay.
exactly. I
Okay.
mean, I would love to get even better at that, and play around, but I don't have a particular focus for next steps. I would love my ideal thing would be to have a group of my photo, like have my own show and have them all be in one room. I think would be amazing. Not all, but a good a lot of them would be, I think, what my next goal. I don't know how I would get there, but that would be something I would like to do. Maybe take portraits of a different group, maybe older people, and get their wisdom, or something like that. I'm not sure.
Interesting. So you'll let it evolve naturally as you just continue taking the classes
Hmm.
and to challenge yourself in different types of photography and
It's one
okay.
of those, it's like any artist, I guess, that you never stop learning and evolving. Something else influences you, or you get inspired by something, you go a different direction. Like now, if people start smiling, I'll snap the spontaneous smiles. Not a say cheese smile, but a genuine. Sometimes they're great.
You can learn more about Amy and her work at amyhorowitzphotography.com and on Instagram at don't_smile_NYC. And be sure to check out her book, which you can find by searching for Walk in the Park, Amy Horowitz.